This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
Hello, Cardinal fans. Welcome to episode 19 of the St. Louis Cardinals Unrestricted podcast. This is your host, Christian May-Suzuki. And wow, never thought we would be saying this, but 15 in a row. The St. Louis Cardinals have won 15 in a row. The 2021 St. Louis Cardinals have won 15 games in a row. It just seemed like impossible before it happened, and yet here we are. The team had a horrendous loss to the Brewers, giving up a 5-run lead, and then they lost 2 games to the Dodgers following that to go to 72-69. Since then, they're now 17-1, and they've won 15 games in a row, which is now a franchise record. So the question is, what really changed? Well, I think a lot of things changed, but then again, not a lot of things changed. And what does that mean? Well, I think the mindset changed. I think the way that people approach the game seemed to change, and I think it was apparent in the way that we were scoring and the way that things were happening for the team. I think that the mindset went from getting on base and looking for OBP, which sort of seemed to be the Jeff Albert perspective, to getting hits and manufacturing runs and making things happen. And I think that mindset has really helped them progress as a team. I think that one of the big things that the Cardinals had an issue with for a while was staring at pitches, very good to hit pitches, and then missing at harder pitches because they're behind the count and they needed to swing at those pitches to protect the plate. You see a lot more of players taking advantage of mistakes and producing off of those mistakes. And I think that has really been a big reason that the Cardinals have made a huge jump in production here. I think that on top of that, you see a lot more of the just proactive movement on the base paths. And I think you can really see that by the way the team scored today. We're recording this just as the Cardinals won their 15th game. And when you take a look at the way they scored, you had a couple of home runs, yes. You had a solo home run by Bader in the second, a solo home run by O'Neill in the fourth, and another home run by De Jong in the ninth to sort of cap things off. But that middle chunk, the chunk that really put the Cardinals ahead, was a single to left center, sacrifice fly to center, scoring on a wild pitch. Those are the little things that the Cardinals, it's a mixture of the Cardinals doing things to take advantage of mistakes and other more blatant mistakes happening that sort of allow them to luck out. Things like, again, throwing a wild pitch on a strikeout, allowing someone to score, making the errors and things that the Cardinals have seen teams make in recent days. So, for example, the Padres game where Tatis inexplicably dropped the fly ball. Little things like that. They are not squandering those moments, and they're also not squandering the pitches that they need to hit. And I think that by doing so, they've really showed off their talent. They're not trying to be something they're not. They're being the baseball players that they grew up being. You grow up not necessarily looking to get on base. You grow up learning to try and hit the ball. And I think the phrase, "you don't walk off an island," for the one that is very prevalent for Dominican and Cuban players, I think that holds true in a lot of ways for American players as well. I don't think that you see a lot of standout prospects anywhere really make a name for themselves because they draw a lot of walks. There are certainly guys like sleeper picks and guys who definitely come up and make a name for themselves walking, but that's usually complementary with some other tool, whether it's power or speed or just an ability to hit. if Juan Soto wasn't necessarily a great hitter and didn't have a lot of power, yes, the way that he draws walks and the way that he doesn't swing at pitches above the zone, it would be impressive, but not nearly as talked about or held in as nearly high a regard as he is right now. So I think the fact that the Cardinals are looking to hit the ball and looking to generate runs and really looking to be proactive and take advantage of mistakes as opposed to playing the count and watching pitches and looking for pitch count and playing for OBP and playing for high pitch counts on starters. I just don't think that is the way that this team was constructed, and especially with the way that Paul Goldschmidt's walk rate has gone down and his strikeout rate has gone up, albeit while he has had a great year, that is just a characteristic of how he is aging and what he's doing right now. So if we need to build our strategy around what our best players are doing, and if Paul Goldschmidt is doing well swinging the bat and needs to swing the bat as opposed to work the count, then let him do that. If guys need to swing the bat and work as opposed to work the count, let him do that. On the other hand, with guys like Tyler O'Neill, it's the opposite. You have a guy like him who maybe needs to work the count a little bit more. He was only drawing, I think he only drew 2 walks in the first 35 games or so. And, he had an eye, it was developing, but he was just too greedy on the 3-strike counts. And now he's taking more walks, he's sitting back and being more patient, and that's what's working for him. So it's making these little adjustments and doing the things that you need to do to put yourself in a position to manufacture runs, not just get on base, but to manufacture runs. And I think the Cardinals have done a really good job of doing that recently. And another thing that they've done a great job of is taking advantage of guys that need to be taken advantage of, and taking advantage of them in the ways that they should be taken advantage of. You look at the way the Padres series went. Like I mentioned in the last episode, or not in the last episode, but in the episode when that was going down, the Padre pitchers that we were seeing, the starters, were very susceptible to having bad starts after the sticky stuff memo came out and after that became more thoroughly enforced. So with guys like that, you don't want to let them get into a sort of a rhythm, and you want to make sure you keep them as uncomfortable as possible and hop on them as quickly as you can. And what did the Cardinals do? They scored in the first, second, third innings of those games. They did what they needed to do based on the pitchers that they were facing. You take a look at the way the Cardinals, maybe not necessarily this game, but the previous 2 games in this Cubs series. You had Steele, who was solid as a reliever, but as he went around the lineup as a starter, you could see the numbers that he allowed start to get better and better. You started to get a lot bigger averages, and you started to see a lot more vulnerability from him later in games. So what did the Cardinals do? They struggled a little bit in the first go around, but then they jumped on him as soon as they saw him a second time, and they hit him hard after the first time through, and they did what they needed to do there in order to win that game. With Zach Davies, he was a guy who was pretty pristine in the games that he won when he got into a rhythm, and was someone who was susceptible to being blown up if you got to him early, as evidenced by a ERA over 10 in his 11 losses. So what did the Cardinals do? They were aggressive, and they got to him early, and we got the bad Davies. And it wasn't necessarily that we got the bad Davies, but the Cardinals, in a sense, made it happen by putting pressure on him with their aggressiveness, not allowing the little mistakes to go by. And I think that really makes the big difference. Now, another big difference that could come this season are the 2 pitchers that we recently saw, Jack Flaherty and Dakota Hudson. So we saw a very short 19 pitch outing from Flaherty, and it was a mixed bag. There were some good, and there was moments where he got squeezed, and the outing may have gone worse than it should have, and maybe he didn't look as bad as the outing might have shown, but he didn't necessarily look the greatest either. He didn't look 100% at all, and while it was good to test the waters and to see if he could get into a rhythm and get ready before the postseason, it's hard to say whether or not that's a possibility after this start, because it just didn't seem like he didn't seem like he was hurt, but he didn't seem like he was in the kind of rhythm or in the kind of space where he could face major league hitters at the level that we need him to be at for the playoffs. So it's hard to say at this point what they're going to do with him. You hope that he makes some progress behind closed doors and maybe gets one more similar type of outing out. He didn't really throw too many pitches, so you don't necessarily have to worry too much about resting him for too long. So hopefully there's a chance that he can get out there one more time this regular season and maybe throw 3 innings as opposed to just a third of an inning. And you can really see, like, okay, he's getting back into a rhythm. You can start to see that he's become the pitcher that he was at the beginning of the season, that he is normally. But until then, it's hard to throw him out there in the playoffs at this point. It's not fun to be throwing out potentially Kim or Lester or Happ, but you don't want to risk the kid's health. You don't want to put him in a situation where he overexerts himself, and you don't want to put him in a situation where he loses confidence because of a situation that is sort of out of his hands and a situation that he's being forced into. And you can argue that he might want to be in that situation. He might want to fight through it because he's the ace, and that shows the mental toughness. But I think if you can avoid that, if you can avoid throwing him into it and when you know that he's not ready, you should obviously avoid it no matter how good he is and no matter how bad the alternative might be. Because it's not just about this year, it's about next year. And even more so, it's about the years after next year when the Cardinals don't have Adam Wainwright anymore. And suddenly Flaherty is the guy who separates the team from having the worst rotation in the baseball. So you really have to look at it from that perspective, and you have to make sure that Jack Flaherty is actually ready to go and ready to play in a playoff environment before you actually force him to do that. Now, a guy who looked a little bit more seasoned, who's been rehabbing a little bit more fresh, is Dakota Hudson. Again, didn't necessarily look like the greatest in the world. It wasn't he wasn't an ace per se, but he did what he needed to do. I mean, 4 hits, 2 earned in 3.2 innings. It's not the greatest in the world again, but he didn't blow up. He threw 61 pitches, 41 strikes. It's a sign that he is in a good position to be ready to go for the playoffs. So in terms of readiness, I'm definitely much more high on on Hudson than I am on Flaherty. I think that Hudson seems like a pretty soft guarantee, not necessarily 100% set in stone, but I would be very surprised if he was not prepared for the playoffs based on what we saw. Flaherty, on the other hand, if he is left off of the wild card or even the first series, I would be disappointed, but I wouldn't necessarily be surprised based on what we saw. The Cardinals are definitely obviously trying to get him back because they understand the starting pitching depth isn't the greatest, and they know we really do need him to make a legitimate run. But it is hard to really say at this point, based on what we saw, because it just did not look like it looked like he still needed some rehab. Not necessarily hurt per se, but just looked like he was still a little too rusty to really go at it at that playoff level. Now, with injuries coming along, another one that has sort of been unfortunate, but perhaps maybe if things end up well, might not be as much so, is the Sosa injury. He isn't going to be out for too long, but a lot of Cardinal fans were dreading having to see DeJong go out there for multiple days during this streak. And yet, he hit a big home run, and he was part of the insane double play that happened. So, it's... as long as he's not detrimental to the team, that's fine. He's providing positives, and we've seen him be a player who can be a positive player. So, as a backup and as a guy who fills in for an injured player, Paul DeJong is really, really nice to have. But at the end of the day, is this one of the last times we see him on the field as a Cardinal? He's made a case for himself, certainly. But it's hard to say with a lot of the rumors circling around that we're getting another shortstop. And with Sosa, with the tools that he has playing so well, you might just end up keeping him. And does Paul DeJong take a bench role next year? Who knows? They might want to see what they can get for him. Or if they do get another shortstop, then what do you do with Paul DeJong? So... It's nice to see him show out, and it'll be nice to see if he can continue to play well during this appearance, and we'll see what happens down the road. But I honestly do believe there is a very high chance that this run with Sosa being hurt will be the last time that we see Paul DeJong out on the field for the Cardinals. And there could be sporadic spots here and there in the playoffs for 2-3 innings where he comes in as a pinch hitter, maybe double switches, but I don't really see him getting consistent playing time with Sosa back unless he really starts tearing up. But I just don't know if he's that kind of player, and I personally don't see that. So it remains to be seen, but I do think that this will be one of, if not the last times that we really see Paul DeJong out on the field consistently as a St. Louis Cardinal. Now, one other thing that, while the Cardinals' run has been impressive and been plenty talked about, one of the things that hasn't been talked about is a potential run at the NL Central title. It's pretty far-fetched. It's pretty outside of the realm of imagination, but it is not entirely implausible. And it'll end up happening if the Cardinals win out and the Brewers lose out. Is this going to happen? Probably not. Ending the season on a 20-plus game winning streak would be, basically breaking the major league record for a consecutive winning streak, while the Brewers also end up losing out. It would be one of the greatest stories in modern regular season history. It's up there with the Braves collapse that the Cardinals benefited from. But it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility, because we play the Brewers again another couple times, and if the Mets can end up taking these next two games against them, then after that they have to deal with the Dodgers, and the Dodgers are going for the number one spot in the NL West still. So if they lose the next two games to the Mets, and then we can sweep them, then there is a legitimate shot that the Cardinals could take first place in the NL Central. Because, the last team that the Cardinals face is the Cubs, who we know aren't very good. So again, it's not something that we should count on. It's not necessarily something that is on many people's radar, but when you really look at it, going up against soft teams for the Cardinals and going up against some of the toughest schedule for the Brewers, based on just the skills of the teams and the way things have been panning out, there is a chance that it could happen, that the Cardinals could win out and the Brewers could lose out. Now again, is it necessarily realistic to expect them team to close out on a record-breaking winning streak? No. But as I said, there is absolutely a possibility, and there is absolutely a chance that the Cardinals could take it. So, on that note, I guess, go Mets. Go Mets. But anyway, with that being said, I do want to talk about this game. I do want to talk about what this game means, and I want to talk about what it signifies for the team, because I think a lot of things that happen in this game really summarize, or it's a amalgamation of all the things that the Cardinals have done and that all the things that the Cardinals have become that has made them what they are right now, and how they've really come together and won this game. And obviously the first big play is the double play. I think that if you haven't seen that double play, you really need to go check it out. But let's get the official scorer's card here. The 3 to 2 to 5 to 5 to 4 to 2 to 8 to 6 double play with a fielder's choice. It's truly, it was remarkable. It was great to watch, and it was that type of organization and that type of team baseball that really represents what the Cardinals organization has meant to its fans and what its fans sort of want it to represent to the world of baseball as a whole. And as bad as they might have seemed at the beginning, as sour as fans might have been on them before, I think that play really, really showed that this is in fact a St. Louis Cardinals team. This is a team that St. Louis Cardinal fans can really be proud of, because they are playing the game the way that St. Louis Cardinal fans have expected it to be played by those who wear the birds on the bat for so many years, for all these years. This is the kind of baseball, team baseball, together baseball, fundamental baseball, smart baseball that we have expected from them. And it's been great to see them finally come together and put together a run that we can be proud of. Now, it did take a little bit of luck, of course. You have things like, again, a wild pitch on a strikeout, similar to, for example, going into a Brewers team with Brandon Woodruff and you're picking Jake Woodford, and you somehow get more production out of your starting pitcher than theirs. Those are the kind of little lucky breaks that, again, the Cardinals capitalized on and really took advantage of. And that's part of baseball. It's part of seeing luck and taking advantage of it. That is what you need to do to really win in baseball, and to take that next step and to be that team that does anything to win. That is gritty baseball at its finest. And you know what? You shouldn't feel bad at all if people say you just got in because of luck. Well, it's about taking advantage of that luck. It's about capturing that luck and turning it into wins. And that's what the Cardinals have been doing more than anybody else. And today really proved it. And, games like, again, Woodruff versus Woodford, a potential, not necessarily Cy Young candidate, but will probably end up getting some sort of votes, is arguably top 10 pitcher in the NL this season, versus a guy who is a younger guy who isn't really established, and you pick up the win, you pick up a better production. He goes 5 innings of scoreless ball. Those are the things that you have to capture, that not all teams capture, but the Cardinals have been taking advantage of and turning into wins. And it's about getting hot at the right time, and it's about clicking and being the right team at the right time, and that's what the Cardinals are doing right now. So hopefully we can see that continue on. And at this point, I don't even know if I want to talk about the wild card at this point, because as long as talk to me after the Mets lose, because I know I should not be putting my faith in the Mets here. I know it's a deadly game, and it's something that their fans have done for years, and it never works out somehow. So I'm sure that we're going to be talking plenty about a Dodger lineup, about a potential Scherzer versus Wainwright matchup. That'll be one for the ages. I don't know if there's going to be too much to talk about here that everyone else isn't going to be going on and on about, other than the fact that these are just two younger guys, two older guys who have really come on in different ways. You have Kershaw, who has maintained a really high velocity and has stayed overpowering in his age, and then you have Wainwright, whose velocity has slowed down, was never necessarily a power pitcher, but whose velocity has come down, and who has become even more delicate and more control balanced on the corners and more reliant on soft contact, yet man, he can still get strikeouts with his curveball. So it's going to be a really interesting matchup, and while the Wainwright blow up might be something to worry about coming into it, I think we worry about that just as much as the Dodgers are going to worry about Scherzer blowing up once. With a guy as experienced as that, with that much playoff run, and with that type of composure and proven experience, there is nothing to worry about. That is going to be one hell of a ball game. Of course, if it happens, because we could always see the Giants, and we could always, hopefully, try and make a run for that division title. Go Mets. And of course, go Cardinals. Thank you all so much for listening. We will be trying to set up halftime rooms during the playoffs now that we know that we're in, and we will hopefully be getting some chats half an hour to an hour before game starts and half an hour to an hour before game time ends. Still working on sort of the specifics around that, but stay tuned on our social media on Twitter at STL Unrestricted, and hopefully we will see you on halftime, and we can have some interesting dialogue real soon when the Cardinals hit the playoffs. Thank you all so much, and go Cardinals.